What's up, fantasy people? The election's over, so we get to focus on football and football alone. Now, every week I put out on Twitter the most advantageous matchups. It doesn't necessarily mean that you got to start these players because these players are going to smash. It's showing that there are going to be really good, excellent players in a really good spot. When you look at the floor play on a weekly basis, some players are absolutely matchup proof. Where you get the absolute ceiling is when they get really, really, really good matchups. So without further ado, let's talk about our top 10 running backs for the NFL Week 10 season. We'll start with none other than Tyrone Tracy. He's going against a really, 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 really bad Carolina defense. Carolina gives up the most rushing touchdowns to opposing running backs on a weekly basis at 1.44 per game. They also give up the most rushing yards per game at 132.89 yards per game. He has taken the backfield by storm. He has owned that opportunity, and he's one of the few players to get excited about in this Week 10 shit show in Germany. The Germans are coming. Speaking of somebody coming into your fantasy roster and should start this week and every week moving forward because weather's cold and you need the big backs, it's Najee Harris. This is a big back, and he's got a great opportunity against the Washington Commanders. Yes, Washington has been absolutely exciting. Yes, they just revamped their secondary and shouldn't be giving up as many air yards to opposing wide receivers by bringing in Marshawn Lattimore. But with that being said, this is a very advantageous matchup for the running backs. It's colder weather. Outdoors equals success for big backs. This game script will call for keeping Daniels off the field due to his big play ability, and obviously the Pittsburgh Steelers want to keep Jaden Daniels off the field as much as humanly possible. Now, let's talk about what the Commanders' defense gives up. They give up the 8th most opposing rushing touchdowns to opposing running backs per game. They're tied at 8th most at 0.89 per game. There's like 4 or 5 teams tied at 0.89 touchdowns per game. They give up the 5th most rushing yards to opposing backs at 115 yards per game. I will say this is a smash matchup. It should be common sense. We got a good player in a very good situation. The only thing that has me concerned is Arthur Smith. Fuck Arthur Smith, right? All right, next. Number 8, Aaron Jones versus Jacksonville Jaguars. Jacksonville is free fantasy points for opposing offenses, especially the running back position. They are tied for 8th. Once again, another team tied for 8th for giving up the most rushing touchdowns to opposing running backs on average at 0.89 rushing touchdowns per game. They give up the 3rd most receptions to opposing running backs at 6.11 per game. So once again, like we spoke about at the beginning of the video, you got good players in a really, really good situations, advantageous matchups. PPR format, Aaron Jones is an absolute smash. All right, so they give up 6.11 receptions per game to opposing running backs. They also give up the 3rd most receiving yards at 49 receiving yards per game. Translation, Aaron Jones is due for a really, really, really good game. Speaking of a guy who's been, everything for the Los Angeles Rams, this is coming in at number 7. We got Kyren Williams versus Miami Dolphins. Give up the 2nd most touchdowns to opposing running backs at a guaranteed 1.25 per game. So that means no matter what, a running back will score for the Los Angeles Rams against the Miami Dolphins. Is it going to be Blake Corum? I sure hope not, because I'm already betting on Kyren Williams anytime touchdown, and you should too. They also give up 103 rushing yards per game and easily a top 5 matchup every single week for opposing RBs. This is a defensive unit you want to start your running backs against on a weekly basis, so make sure you look at the schedule moving forward, but he's definitely a smash start, definitely a great RB this week. It's more for his rushing upside than his receiving upside this week, so I don't really like him as a receiving back because the Finns are really good defensively against receiving backs. Staying on Monday Night Football, same matchup. We got Devon Achane against the LA Rams. Rams have been getting better on a weekly basis defensively, but the one constant weakness they have is against opposing backs. They allow 0.7 rushing touchdowns per game to opposing RBs. They allow 9th most rushing yards per game at 109, and they give up at least 35 receiving yards to opposing backs on a weekly basis. That screams Devon Achane production. And the only reason why Achane really struggled was, obviously, if you guys have been living under a rock, Tua has been injured, and now that he's back, they are facing way lighter boxes because Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are deep threats. And when you face lighter boxes, he is a threat in the pass game. He's definitely a threat in the run game. I think he's got a smash matchup. He smashed last week against a really good defense. He's going to smash this weekend against a really bad defense. Let's talk about Breece Hall, right? We haven't gotten the one we wanted, but it's still a great matchup, and he's still a great back. And he hasn't lived up to expectations, but second half of the season last year, he turned up, and hopefully he does the same thing this week. He's got a really good matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. The Cards give up 0.89 rush touchdowns per game, once again tied for 8th. It's the 7th most. They also allow the 7th most rushing yards to opposing running backs at 111.3. And across the board, this is a great matchup. They allow for 4.78 receptions to opposing backs. It's the 10th most advantageous matchup. They also allow the 10th most advantageous matchup when it comes to receiving yards at 37.56. This is a smash start. We're not ignoring the numbers. We're paying attention to the numbers. You don't want your ceiling plays to be on the bench. Always start Breece Hall. Always start your studs. And this guy got robbed. Ray Davis robbed him from a hell of a productive day. Congratulations to Ray Davis for taking that big one to the house. It really hurt my feelings because I got James Cook relatively everywhere. But number 4, most advantageous matchup. Number 4, best running back for NFL Week 10 is James Cook versus the Indianapolis Colts. Colts give up the fourth most rushing yards on a weekly basis to opposing backs at 121.78 rushing yards per game. They give up close to 5 receptions to opposing backs. That's right in James Cook's wheelhouse, and they give up 35 receiving yards to opposing backs as well. Also in James Cook's wheelhouse. They're free fantasy points for running backs. So let's go fire up James Cook. Here's another guy that you got to fire up, and you know what? He is an absolute monster, and I wish I would have got more exposure to him in round 3 in best ball this offseason. That's none other than Derrick Henry in another shootout matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. This is going to be a fun Thursday night. Or last time these two teams faced off, it was a hell of a game. It was very exciting. A lot of fantasy points were scored, and I'm anticipating the exact same thing. The Bengals defensive unit also tied at 8th most for allowing touchdowns to opposing running backs at 0.89. They give up 93 rush yards per game as well. Look for Derrick Henry to surpass both of those numbers. And based on the last matchup, the lesson learned is you don't want to turn this into a track meet. Similar to Najee, bigger backs in gross weather equals great fantasy production. Hello, Derrick Henry, not just for this week, but every other week moving forward. We love him. He's been absolutely sick. You could definitely rely on him to get into the end zone. All right, number 2, Bijan Robinson versus New Orleans. New Orleans are frauds. We told you that. We constantly told you that. The first 2 weeks were luck and just really, really, really bad teams. Really, really bad teams. The Saints defense gives up 1.11 rushing touchdowns per game, 4th most advantageous matchup on the week. So that's guaranteed a rushing touchdown will be scored. I don't think it's going to be Kirk Cousins who's going to get the rushing touchdown. It could be Tyler Algier, but I'm betting on Bijan Robinson. So we have that touchdown upside. They also give up 106 rushing yards per game. That's the 11th best matchup for RBs. Bijan has been impressive, and the Saints stink. Very, very simple. And let's go to somebody. This is guys, this was the most impressive play from one of the most exciting players in football. That's Saquon Barkley, juke, spin, reverse hurdle. This guy's been playing Call of Duty. He's mastered Omni movement in COD and in real life. Shout out to Saquon Barkley. Very impressive, and it's a really good matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, A.J. Brown could be out for this week. We're talking about another 2 weeks, which really stinks, but that's for a later conversation. Dallas Goedert could also be out. But if Dallas Goedert does play, he's a smash start, but that's for our tight end video. With that being said, Dallas Rundy is tied for 2nd in terms of allowing a rushing touchdown per game at 1.25 per week. Yes, Jalen Hurts has vulture touchdowns in the past, but hopefully Saquon finds the end zone. They allow top 10 production to opposing running backs when it comes to rushing yards at 108.75 rush yards per game. They also allow backs 4 receptions per game, once again, right in his wheelhouse, for 41.5 receiving yards. So that's a lot of receiving yards. That's over 10 yards per reception. With that being said, guys, I appreciate you tuning in. I know it's been a while. We were sick last week, but we're back. Hopefully these backs absolutely smash for you guys. I'm definitely going to try to get every one of these backs who are not on the Thursday night slate or the Monday night slate in our Drafters Fantasy $3.30 slate. First place gets $1,500 USD. If you guys want to sign up on Drafters Fantasy, make sure you use promo code DISCO. We'll double your initial deposit up to $100 Ruskies. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. And until next time, which will be about 2 hours, peace.